There was a time when television wasn't just something we watched, it was something we felt. A time when gathering around the TV set meant more than passing the hours. It meant witnessing the world change, one episode at a time. And though decades have passed, the glow of those moments still lives in us, shaping who we became, how we see the world, and the stories we continue to tell. Imagine it for a moment. It's the late 1950s, maybe the early 1960s. The furniture is simple, the lights are warm, the carpet's thick and soft beneath your feet. And in the center of the living room, almost like a shrine, stands the family television. A solid wooden cabinet, as heavy as a bookshelf, humming gently as it warms up. The screen flickers to life in black and white, the sound rich and slightly crackling, like a familiar voice coming through a radio. Families would rush through dinner just to make it in time. Kids ran down hallways, sliding into the living room floor as the theme song began. Parents turned off lamps, adjusted antennas, and finally settled into their chairs as the room filled with the glow of a world far larger than their own. Because back then, television didn't just entertain, it connected, it inspired, it taught, and for many of us it helped define who we are. Those early shows were more than programs, they were companions, they were rituals, they were lessons in kindness, courage, humor, and hope. They were our first windows into adventure, family, love, loss, friendship, imagination, and possibility. Maybe you remember the heartwarming simplicity of Leave It to Beaver, the way it captured childhood, the way we wanted to remember it, innocent, curious, full of gentle mistakes and gentle wisdom. Or perhaps your home echoed with laughter from I Love Lucy, with Lucille Ball's wild expressions and perfect comedic timing sending entire households into hysterics. Watching her felt like being let in on a secret, a moment of pure joy shared by millions at the exact same time. Television back then had a way of slowing life down, even when the world outside was speeding up. As the 1960s unfolded with its protests, its new music, its social revolutions, shows like The Andy Griffith Show offered a return to something safe. A place where small-town sheriffs solved problems with patience and warmth, where lessons were honest and simple, and where laughter could soften even the hardest day. But television didn't just comfort, it pushed boundaries, too. Some shows challenged us to think differently. The Twilight Zone opened doors to questions we didn't even know we had about time, morality, fear, humanity. Each episode felt like stepping into another dimension, one that made us look at our own world with new eyes. And Star Trek dared to imagine a future where humanity transcended its divisions, a message that resonated deeply in a decade defined by conflict and change. By the time the 1970s arrived, television had become a powerful mirror reflecting who we were and who we hoped to be. Shows like All in the Family broke barriers, forcing living rooms to confront real issues: prejudice, politics, class, identity. Archie Bunker wasn't just a character, he was a reflection of the tension inside American homes, all the stubbornness, humor, love, and clashing values of a nation evolving right before our eyes. And yet, amid the seriousness, television was also becoming more colorful, more vibrant, more alive, literally. When color TV arrived, it transformed not just the way we watched, but the way we remembered. Suddenly the world looked richer, the reds deeper, the blues bolder, the stories brighter. Shows like The Brady Bunch brought sunshine into our homes, blending laughter, blended families, and warm-hearted chaos in a way that felt both modern and familiar. These shows didn't just fill time, they filled meaning. They influenced how we dressed, how we talked, how we behaved. Kids imitated their favorite characters. Teenagers debated their favorite episodes. Parents saw slices of their own lives reflected back at them, sometimes uncomfortably, sometimes beautifully. Television became a cultural hearth, a place where families gathered not just to watch, but to belong. And as the years continued to unfold, the golden age of TV grew richer, more daring, more unforgettable. But even as new shows pushed the medium forward, those early programs remained the foundation. They stayed in our hearts long after the sets were turned off, long after the actors aged, long after the world changed again and again. Those shows shaped a generation, maybe several, and in many ways they shaped us too, because what we watched becomes part of who we are. The stories we love become the stories we carry. And the golden age of television didn't just give us characters and episodes, it gave us memories. It gave us identity. It gave us moments that echo through time. And our journey through that golden age has only just begun. By the time the 1970s arrived, television had grown from a household novelty into the pulse of American culture. It was no longer just an escape, it was a teacher, a storyteller, and for millions of families, a nightly ritual that brought everyone into the same room. The world outside was changing fast, and television evolved right along with it. Gone were the days when TV simply showed us an idealized version of life. Now it began to show the truth, messy, complicated, funny, emotional, and often uncomfortable. And because of that honesty, these stories resonated even deeper. If you grew up in that decade, you'll remember how everything felt a little louder, a little brighter, a little bolder. The living rooms had shag carpets and wood-paneled walls, and the TV sets now in full color glowed like tiny suns in the corner. The antenna on top never quite stayed perfect. so someone was always adjusting it while a brother or sister shouted, "There, hold it right there," as the picture finally came into focus. And when it did, the magic began. Shows like Happy Days brought a warm and comforting nostalgia for an earlier America. It gave us the cool of the Fonz, the innocence of 1950s friendships, and the joy of laughter that felt both timeless and sincere. Families across the country looked forward to each episode, knowing it would bring them that reassuring familiarity, like comfort food for the soul. But alongside the sweetness were shows that dared to poke at the social and political realities of the time. Good Times and Sanford and Son brought working-class black families into America's living rooms with honesty and humor. The Jeffersons showed success, ambition, and the complexities of finally moving on up. These shows didn't shy away from difficult topics: poverty, inequality, pride, prejudice, but they wrapped them in warmth, humanity, and unforgettable characters. And then there was MASH, a show that somehow blended war, comedy, heartbreak, and humanity into something that touched nearly every viewer who ever saw it. It wasn't just a sitcom. It was a mirror held up to the absurdity of conflict and the fragility of the human spirit. It made people laugh, cry, and think, all in the span of 30 minutes. And when its final episode aired, the entire nation stopped. More people watched it than the Super Bowl. It wasn't just television, it was a cultural event. That was the power of TV back then. It didn't just reflect life, it made us feel life. By the early 1980s, television had become brighter, faster, and filled with a new kind of energy. The remote control arrived, changing the way we watched forever. No longer did someone have to walk across the room and turn the knob. With a simple click, channels changed like magic. And with cable television growing rapidly, the options began to multiply. The 80s gave us stories filled with imagination and adventure tales that still echo deeply in our memories. Knight Rider, the A-Team MacGyver, they gave us heroes who solved problems with creativity, humor, and heart. They made childhood heroic. They made adolescence optimistic. And they filled living rooms with a sense of daring possibility. For families, there were shows that felt like home: Family Ties, Growing Pains, The Cosby Show. These programs didn't just portray families, they shaped them. They influenced parenting styles, school conversations, even the way kids thought about the world. Alex P. Keaton taught us ambition. Dr. Huxtable taught us humor and wisdom. These characters became almost like guests in our own homes, people we knew, people we cared about. And then came the shows that pushed boundaries in a different way. Cheers, The Golden Girls, Murphy Brown. They showcased adults with flaws, humor, vulnerability, and strength. They made it okay to age, to struggle, to start over. They reminded us that life didn't come with instructions, but laughter could soften nearly anything. And of course, there was Miami Vice, a show that rewrote television language entirely. The music, the colors, the fashion, everything felt electric. It didn't just influence culture, it created culture. For the first time, television felt almost like cinema, stylish, moody, unforgettable. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about TV in the 80s was its sense of optimism. Even when a story was tough, there was still hope woven into it. Problems could be solved, relationships could be mended. Families, whether by blood or by choice, always found their way back to each other. Then came the 90s, and everything changed again. It was the decade when television grew up, when it gained emotional depth, sharper writing, and characters who felt breathtakingly real. Audiences were ready for complexity, and TV delivered. Shows like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air blended comedy with heartfelt lessons about identity, belonging, and family. Full House taught kindness. Boy Meets World taught growing up. Friends gave us a new idea of what family could look like, a group of people who loved each other, supported each other, and shared their lives in a way that felt as intimate as our own friendships. Meanwhile, shows like X-Files, Twin Peaks, and pushed the boundaries of what television could be: dark, mysterious, thrilling, beautiful. They created worlds that felt larger than life and yet deeply personal at the same time. By the end of the 90s, television wasn't just influencing us, it was reflecting us, our values, our fears, our dreams, and the golden age had grown richer than ever before. As the 1990s faded into the new millennium, something extraordinary happened. Television, once a source of comfort, routine, and family ritual, began to transform into something larger, something bolder, something almost intimate. The stories became deeper, the characters became more complicated, and for the first time, TV wasn't just entertainment, it was a mirror reflecting who we truly were. The early 2000s felt like the beginning of a new era. Technology was changing quickly, and the way we watched TV was changing with it. Cable networks were taking risks, writers were breaking rules, directors were experimenting with new tones and new emotions, and as the world stepped into the 21st century, television stepped with us, evolving into a medium capable of storytelling as powerful as cinema. Shows like The Sopranos didn't just push boundaries, they shattered them. Tony Soprano wasn't a hero or a villain, he was us. Conflicted, flawed, searching for meaning. The show made audiences uncomfortable because it showed something real, the human struggle beneath the surface. It paved the way for a new kind of TV, messy, raw, honest. Then came The West Wing, offering hope and idealism during turbulent times. The writing was sharp, the dialogue electric, and the characters felt like people we wished could lead us, people with conviction, heart, and humanity. Watching it felt like stepping into a world where the best version of ourselves still mattered and lost. When that plane crashed onto a mysterious island, it wasn't just another drama, it was an event. People gathered in break rooms, living rooms, cafes, and online forums to theorize about symbols, clues, secrets. It brought back something television had long been losing: community, that shared experience of watching something at the exact same time, week after week, and living in the mysteries together. But the early 2000s also gave us stories that touched the softest parts of the human heart. Gilmore Girls wrapped us in warmth, conversation, and love that felt authentic and familiar. Friday Night Lights showed us small-town struggles with unbelievable tenderness. Scrubs blended comedy and heartbreak in ways that felt deeply human. These shows weren't just stories, they were companions. They made us laugh on the hard days and feel understood on the loneliest ones. Then came the turning point: streaming. Suddenly, the TV in the living room wasn't the only portal into another world. Laptops, tablets, even phones became screens where stories lived. Episodes were no longer weekly events, they arrived all at once, ready to be devoured in a weekend. And with this shift came a new wave of storytelling, darker, richer, more complex. Shows like Breaking Bad redefined what television could be. Walter White's descent wasn't just shocking, it was Shakespearean. It was the story of a man, crushed by life, finally choosing to become the strongest version of himself, even if it destroyed him. It asked questions that lingered long after the credits rolled. Mad Men took us backward in time, yet closer to ourselves than ever, exploring identity, ambition, and the ghosts we carry. Its style, its mood, its slow-burning honesty, it was television as art. And then came The Office. Simple, hilarious, awkward, heartfelt, what seemed like a humble mockumentary became one of the most beloved shows of all time. Why? Because it knew something no other show had captured: the beauty of ordinary life, the quiet romance, the small victories, the laughter that gets you through another day, the friendships that become family when you least expect it. As streaming grew, the golden age didn't fade, it expanded. Shows like Game of Thrones turned television into global spectacle. Stranger Things reignited our love of the 1980s and the supernatural. The Crown wove history with emotion in a way that felt royal and human at once. This Is Us took the power of family drama to new heights, reminding us that our past, present, and future are always intertwined. But for all its innovation and evolution, something surprising emerged: a longing, a quiet, powerful nostalgia for the shows that shaped our childhoods, our families, our earliest memories. People began binge-watching old classics again. Comfort shows like Friends, Full House, The Fresh Prince, and The Brady Bunch became lifelines during difficult times. They offered warmth, reliability, and familiarity, the same comfort they once gave us decades earlier. Even newer audiences, kids who weren't even born when these shows aired, felt connected to them, as if the stories themselves had a timeless heartbeat. And perhaps that's the secret. Television changed, but the power of television didn't. Because no matter the decade, no matter the screen size, certain shows continue to resonate, not because of their special effects or their budgets, but because of their humanity. They tell the stories we all share: love, fear, family, courage, identity, hope. They remind us that we're not alone, that someone, somewhere, has felt what we feel. And today, as we stand in a world of endless choices, thousands of shows, 1,000 genres, those old programs still call to us. They whisper memories. They remind us of who we were, and in many ways, who we are. Because the golden age of television never truly ended. It simply grew with us. When we look back now, at all the decades we lived through, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s, it becomes clear that television wasn't just part of our lives. It shaped them. It shaped our humor, our values, our dreams. It shaped the way we see love, friendship, courage, family, and even ourselves. Television was never just a box in the living room. It was the storyteller of a generation. Because if you think about it, every one of us carries a little piece of those shows inside us. The lessons we learned without even realizing it. The phrases we still quote after all these years. The jokes, the characters, the moments that still make us smile or tear up when they cross our memory. Television taught us about right and wrong long before school ever did. It showed us the consequences of choices, the weight of kindness, the beauty of forgiveness. We grew up believing that problems could be solved, that families always found their way back together, that love in all its forms could soften even the hardest hearts. And maybe that's why those shows still feel magical today. Because they weren't just entertainment, they were emotional blueprints. We learned what friendship should feel like from shows like Friends, Cheers, and The Golden Girls. We learned that loyalty mattered, that humor could carry us through almost anything, and that the people we choose can become just as important as the people we're reborn to. We learned what bravery looked like from heroes like MacGyver, Michael Knight, and even Mulder and Scully. They showed us that courage isn't just about fighting villains, it's about standing for what's right, even when you stand alone. We learned about family, its chaos, its warmth, its imperfections from the Brady Bunch, Full House, Family Ties, The Cosby Show, and so many others. Those homes, those kitchens, those living rooms, they felt like places we had visited, places we belonged. We learned about compassion from Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, his soft voice, his gentle words, his belief that every person deserved kindness. Those lessons shaped hearts in ways no test or textbook ever could. Some of us learned about justice from Law and Order, about ambition from The West Wing, about the fragility of the human soul from The Sopranos, and about the power of imagination from Star Trek and The Twilight Zone. These weren't just shows, they were worlds. And for half an hour, or sometimes an entire weekend, we lived in them. But perhaps the most beautiful truth is this: television connected us. Before streaming, before on-demand, before endless choices, there was a time when millions of people watched the same episode at the same moment. A time when the next day at school, at work, in the neighborhood, everyone talked about the same scene, the same joke, the same cliffhanger. Television gave us a shared language, a cultural heartbeat we all felt together, and in that connection, something extraordinary happened. Television didn't just reflect who we were, it helped shape who we became. Even now, in a world overflowing with screens, shows, genres, and choices, we still return to those classics, not because they're old, but because they're timeless. Because they remind us of the people we once were, the children sitting cross-legged on the carpet, the teenagers staying up late for their favorite show, the parents watching with their kids, the families gathering around a single glowing screen. The world has changed. Technology has changed. The way we watch has changed. But the feeling that hasn't. There's still something magical about a story well told. About characters who feel real. About voices that stay with us long after the episode ends. About the comfort of returning to a show like an old friend. Familiar, warm, reliable. And maybe that's why the golden age of television will never truly end. Because it wasn't defined by budgets or technology or special effects. It was defined by connection. The connection between stories and the people who needed them. Between creators and dreamers. Between characters and viewers. Between the past and the present. Between who we were and who we are. Television helped raise us, it comforted us, it challenged us, it entertained us, it shaped us. And long after the sets have been turned off, long after the networks have changed, long after the actors have aged, the stories remain. They live in our memories, in our conversations, in our hearts. So when we look back at the TV shows that made us who we are, we're not just remembering episodes, we're remembering life itself. The laughter, the tears, the lessons, the voices we can still hear if we close our eyes. Those shows didn't just tell stories, they told our story. And in a world that's always changing, that might be the most beautiful thing television has ever given us.